Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So we're finally back with the patch 3.0 tier list. And this one of course includes Sett, because we did actually wait for Sett to release before we actually came up with the tier list. So before we start, I'm going to quickly spend like a minute or two to lay the groundwork for the tier list. So first up, this is of course based on solo queue. So some picks, like for example, let's say Jinx, is going to be way better if you duo and you use a Lulu together with her. But we're going to take it for solo queue. So that's the first context. Secondly, obviously every tier list is opinion based. So this is my opinion. It's alright to disagree, and I actually invite you guys to discuss with me in the comments what are your thoughts. I'm sure a lot of you will agree on a lot of my picks, and a lot of you will disagree on a lot of my picks. But anyways, for this tier list, I think it's sort of like with the new 3.0, I tried to bring you guys a new generation of tier lists. Because if you guys didn't know, which of course you wouldn't, I normally like to watch a lot of other content creators' tier lists, and I allow it to heavily influence my opinion. And this time, I did watch like one or two, but this time, I based this all solely on my opinion. So certain picks, like some of them think is really good, some of them they think is bad. Sometimes I have it the other way around, or slightly lower or higher, kind of something like that. But as I said, it's my opinion, and of course my opinion is going to be slightly influenced by my rank. So my rank currently at this point is Diamond. So I'm not saying this is a tier list for Diamond rank, but it's going to be influenced by the Diamond meta. And while this is a general tier list for all ranks, it's of course impossible to cover every single rank together in one tier list. So this is just the general, like the middle ground between all the ranks. Because obviously, like in bronze or silver, Master Yi is going to be S plus tier, but in like let's say Grandmaster, Master Yi is going to be like trash tier. So that's a very obvious example. So no way to cover the entire spectrum, but I'm going to try my best. So before we get into it really quickly, I'm going to talk about the meanings of each tier. S plus, obviously the best champions in their respective roles. S is still very, very good champions in those roles, closely behind the S plus champions. A plus is good champions, definitely above average. A is sort of like around the average or okay champions. B and C, if they are even there. Some roles I didn't even have a C tier if I remember. B and C sort of, and some roles even have a D. I think I might go all the way to D. Basically, D is complete trash. C is pretty bad. B is like below average, but B, a lot of times I put a lot of niche picks into B tier as well. Alright, so with all that out of the way, we can actually get on with the tier list, starting off with the Baron lane. Alright, so as you guys can see here, alright, before we get into that, actually, we gotta cover one last thing, which is Sett. So Sett is of course the newest release, releasing a few days ago, and honestly I have ranked him in the top tier list, but I know he can be played in support, jungle, and mid as well, but I didn't rank him in those, honestly, because I don't think it's fair for me to rank him, because I honestly am not 100% familiar with Sett, because I do play ADC, and in all my ranked matches, I never faced a Sett support. I faced a Sett jungle once, and I always see Sett top, and I played with a Sett mid once, so I don't think I can really judge too much at that point. But anyways, we're gonna get into the actual discussion. Maybe not every single champion, but we're going to discuss. So honestly, in my opinion, Fiora is still the best Baron laner. If you know how to play her, she's going to be the best. Jace is very overtuned at the moment, so in every role that he can play, he's going to be pretty good. Baron lane is probably his most natural role. I wouldn't say it's his best role, but it is normally where you find Jace. Jace obviously is S plus there. Renekton is in a very good spot at the moment. And Sett, the new champion. Sett, honestly, I feel that he is very strong, and I feel that he probably will be in the S plus tier next patch or so, but I tentatively put him in the S tier because I haven't really seen really good Sett players yet. Obviously, Sett is a very easy champion to int on if you don't really know how to play him correctly, and I do think, even though he's not a very hard champion, I do think people take a little bit of time to learn how to play him correctly. So for now, I think, based on what I see, he's in the S tier. Alright, so now a few picks that I think are very good that maybe not everybody does. Riven, I honestly still think is really, really criminally underrated. I think she's very, very good, because if you're good at her, you will just destroy people. The only problem is that the current meta has a lot of CC, but honestly, if you're a good Riven player, you still can play Riven very, very well. Wukong, very underrated by a lot of people as well. I'm sure everybody knows Wukong's ultimate is a deadly weapon in any team fight, But his laning phase, after they buffed it a lot of times, honestly, Wukong's laning phase is alright at the moment. He's not gonna be dominant in lane or anything, but he can at least get through the laning phase and get to the team fights where he wants to be. So, Wukong's still very good. Malphite is honestly a very safe pick if you're auto field top, or just a very good pick in general. It's one of the few true tanks we have, and just very good in team fights in general. Camille, she did get a nerf on the shield, but if you're good at her, she's still going to be good. Garen, just very tanky, very good. Darius, obviously, can carry a match and get a pentakill if he gets resets. A lot better in lower elo, but in the higher elo you get, the worse he gets. But honestly, because Wall Rift, he has Proto Belt, so even in higher elos, Darius can still work. I see people playing Darius in like Challenger, Grandmaster, and Master, etc., and they still make him work. Alright, so I'm not going to discuss every single pick, because that will take a little bit too long. So, but we honestly got a lot to cover. So Mundo, honestly, very underrated by a lot of people as well. I think he could be borderline S tier. Obviously, another true tank. Pantheon, I think, is a little bit overrated. Obviously, with the Edge of Night edition, he's gotten a lot stronger. But I don't quite think he is in the S tier. Who else we got to discuss? Graves, I think, is a little bit underrated as well. I think he can do pretty well in the Baron lane, but he is a little bit more of a late game style champion. Akali in the Baron lane is just alright. You're generally playing for like team fights if you play her in the Baron lane, because you likely won't really get solo kills in the Baron lane because everybody's pretty tanky and pretty hard to kill. Alright, so now Kayle obviously got a huge nerf in terms of her scaling, and you can really feel that even when she gets to like level 10 2 items where she used to feel pretty strong, she doesn't anymore. And when you hit like level 15, like even like 3-4 items, you still don't really feel all that strong. So honestly, I think Kayle's in a pretty bad spot now, because probably most ADCs are just better to pick than Kayle. Obviously, you won't pick ADCs in the top lane, but what I'm trying to say is that Kayle doesn't scale as insanely anymore, but the fact remains that if you reach a late game kill state, she is always going to be good. But the issue is it's very hard to reach that state, so I still have her in A tier for now. Alright, so B tier mostly made up of niche picks. Like if you are autofilled from jungle, maybe you are a Rengar main, you can play Rengar. Yasuo in the top lane, not the best, because really hard for him to do well against a lot of these champions. He's way better in the mid lane. Jarvan, a very niche counter pick as well. Vayne, also a very niche counter pick. And C tier, Teemo, Singed, and Nasus are just pretty bad in general. I wouldn't really pick them. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the jungle. Alright, so here we have the jungle. Honestly, not too much discussion needed at the upper echelons. I believe Lee Sin has been the best jungler for months and months on end. Same with Kha'Zix, who caught a couple of nerfs a couple of patches ago, but still very good. Rengar, honestly, has been rising up in terms of both popularity and his power. His power, technically, he hasn't really been buffed or anything, but most people thought that he used to be overtuned last time, and a lot of people dropped him after he got nerfed. But honestly, he's still really good, and for people who can play Rengar, he's still really strong of a jungler. Jace, as we discussed previously, completely overtuned, really strong champion, so really good in the jungle as well. Alright, so Nunu, probably the best tank we have in the jungle, so he's all the way up there. Now Wukong, I've rated in the middle of S tier, and honestly, I have tried Wukong jungle very recently, and I've done really well on him, but I do feel that his clear is very slow. Both his first clear and even when you get to the later stages of the game, your clear is going to be really slow, because Wukong normally builds Bruiser, not full assassin or not full tank, so his clear is going to be really slow. But just the value of his ultimate in team fights, I think, is enough to rank Wukong highly in the jungle tier list. I do think his better role now is in the Baron lane, but I still think Wukong in the jungle can work. Now we have Fiora and Riven, two, honestly, Baron lane champions who simply are so strong that they are even good in the jungle. So basically, these are the sort of champions that if you're auto-filled to the jungle as a Baron laner, you would pick. But honestly, for a jungler themselves, I don't think you really want to pick up Fiora and Riven. Now, Pantheon, I do think, is stronger in the jungle than in the Baron lane, because he can influence the map a lot easier in the early game with his early game power. So I do think he is pretty good in the jungle. Now, Xin Zhao, I still think is really strong, but just not as good as everybody above him. So I put him in a solid A tier. Same goes for Camille, whose clear did get slowed down by a lot. But, you know, same goes with like Fiora and Riven, where if you're autofill and you're a Camille player, you can still make her work pretty well. Now, Evelynn, our first real AP damage option, the only reason why she is this high is because there is really no one above her that is a viable AP option. So sometimes when you need to round out your team comp with AP, you just need Evelynn to be there. Graves, once again, criminally underrated, and I honestly think he's very strong. I recently got autofill jungle. I actually got a pentakill on Graves, so I really think Graves is very strong, but of course, you gotta make it to the late game where you have like 3 items to actually be useful. In the early game, you're gonna be pretty bad, so yeah. Another viable tank we have in the jungle is Mundo. So Mundo is pretty much your only other viable tank other than Nunu, and we have done the complete guide on Mundo jungle, and I did try it out. Still pretty strong and very underrated. Morgana is your other AP option if you don't like playing Evelynn, which I don't. And I've just recently done the Morgana guide like a couple of days ago, so you can check that out if you want to see Morgana jungle. In the rest of jungle, alright, I honestly think the Jax is very overrated in the jungle. So we have seen in like the Horizon Cup where the winning team did have a Jax jungle in a lot of matches, but honestly they were funneling him, and Jax needs a lot of resources. He's not gonna get enough resources from the jungle, and I see a lot of Jax jungle players who, like when Dragon spawns, they're on the opposite side of the map, split pushing, and same thing like when Baron spawns or like, you know, when Rift Herald spawns, they're always on the opposite side of the map, split pushing. Don't play split pushing Jax if you're the jungler, because you are needed there for your smite. So Jax jungle, not for split pushing reasons, but for gold reasons, not too good in the jungle in my opinion. Rammus is sort of like a counter pick against AD, heavy AD team comps. And Tryndamere, not too good in jungle. Mastery, pretty bad in higher elo. Kill, absolute trash in the jungle, because you're so weak in the early stages of the game, but you have to show up to the Dragon and Rift Herald fights with your smite, and you're just going to get obliterated. Alright, so for Shyvana, honestly, I think she is the worst pure jungler in my opinion, because she is simply too predictable. She's always going to be at Dragon, so the enemy team can play around that fact very easily, and you have to be at Dragon because you need Dragons to scale. If not, you're half a jungler. So Shyvana, the worst like real jungler in my opinion. And with that, we can actually move on to the mid lane. Okay, so here we have the mid lane. In my opinion, Sett is actually super duper strong right now. He has Edge of Night, he has Serelda's Grudge, and all these tools that just make him really, really strong. He did catch a slight nerf like 2 patches ago, but honestly, I don't think it's enough. And I've seen so many Sett just take over games. Zett's main weakness is his late game, where he can only burst a single target. But honestly, sometimes Sett gets his team so ahead that, you know, we don't ever reach late game. Like, I have had times where Sett is so fat, he just puts down a shadow, he uses his E slashes, and he uses his double shurikens, and I'm basically like one auto attack away from dying. He doesn't even have to ult me. Of course, I'm ADC and I'm squishy, but Zett's damage is just too insane. He really needs a nerf. So Galio, the reason why I put him so high is because he pretty much counters everybody in the S plus and S tier, aside from the AD champions being Jace and Zed. So Galio really, really strong at the moment. Whether you build him tank or AP, he's really, really strong. Ziggs caught some nerfs, but honestly, he's still really, really strong. Late game carry. We're not going to cover all the reasons why Ziggs is so good again, because we do that every single challenge, but Ziggs is really good. Jace barely making it. I wouldn't even say barely making it. He is in the bottom of the S plus tier, but just because of how strong he is in general. Honestly, I do feel Jace is very, very strong. Now, S tier, Orianna still very, very good, very consistent pick that pretty much will work in any game. Now, Katarina, we have made Katarina complete guide. Honestly, I feel for Katarina one trick, she is definitely S. I wouldn't put S plus just because of how much CC there is in the meta, but she is S if you're a one trick. She's S if you're a Katarina main. If you are not a Katarina main or one trick, only pick Katarina when there is a very low CC team. So Corki, I think, is very underrated at the moment in both ADC and mid lane roles. Corki, I do feel, is very, very strong. A lot of DPS, a lot of damage, and huge value from his package in team fights. Diana still really good with her giant AoE teamfight ultimate. Twisted Fate, still in the A plus tier, really good shove and roam kind of style, but really unique playstyle compared to a lot of other champions, where you have to use your ult to roam and get picks with your team with your numbers advantage. Now Akali, honestly, ever since she is like caught nerfs and all, she hasn't really been as strong as she was. And I do get destroyed by like Akali mains from time to time, but I honestly feel that Akali's power level isn't so insane anymore, and you have to actually be good at the champion to destroy people with it, which I think should have been how it was all along. So Akali in the A+ tier. Same with Yasuo. Yasuo is really good if you know how to play him, and he's in the A+ tier. And Akshan, honestly, I moved him up a little bit because I've been playing a lot of Akshan in the mid lane, and I do think Akshan is actually pretty strong in the mid lane if you don't know how to play him. He has a pretty high skill floor, so it could be a little bit hard to play. Alright, so now Kayle in the mid lane, probably her, not probably, definitely still her best role. I'm putting her like average, which is very generous already in my opinion. But if you really want to play Kayle, mid lane is the best place to play Kayle, where she is at least a little bit safer. So yeah, so the rest of the A tier, pretty average mid lane picks where you can make work in matches, but they are not the best. Picks like Ahri, Gragas, Seraphine, Annie, and Fizz. Honestly, I think a lot of people are overrating Gragas. I don't think he is as good as everybody else thinks he is, but that's just me. Now, Lux and Morgana, better play in the support role. I think Lux is not in a very good spot at the moment. I have seen some Cannon mid. I don't really know how I feel about it. I don't think it really is that good in the lane, but you're honestly picking it for your team fight, ultimate in the like objective fight, so I guess you can make it work. Aurelion Sol just simply the best, not the best, simply the worst mid laner out of them all. Alrighty, so now back to my favorite, which is the ADCs. So if you notice, I split the tier list into two, which makes it really long with a lot of black spaces on the side, so apologies for that. But here we have the tier list. So obviously the bottom part is the APCs and the top part is ADCs. I really think there's no point lumping all of them together into one tier list. The reason being, you would never pick the bottom 5 champions if your team already has AP. There simply is no reason, because you're supposed to be the ADC. The role you're supposed to fulfill is the consistent DPS, physical DPS at that. So you will pick the top part of the tier list, but if your team has 0 AP or only like an enchanter support, then you would pick from the bottom part of the tier list. So that's why I chose to split into two, because you wouldn't pick an AP carry if you know your team already has AP anyway. So we're gonna first look at the ADC side of the house. So Kai'Sa, I honestly feel, is back to being the best ADC. I have tested her out quite a bit, and honestly after that buff on her E, I think she's back to being the best. Then next, followed very closely behind by Lucian, who is still in a very good spot. Essence Reaver got buffed again, but I don't think it's a good item for him. I'm just putting that, I know that's a little bit of a bait statement, I'm just putting that in the tier list so that people know not to build Essence Reaver on Draven. It's only 5 extra AD, the changes are not significant enough for it to make it a good item for not just Lucian, but anyone. So now, I'm putting Draven where he belongs in the S+ tier, because honestly, the only people who are going to pick Draven are Draven 1-tricks, and if you're a Draven 1-trick, Draven will be S+ tier for you, and I think I'm going to be leaving Draven in the S+ tier from here on out, because, as I said, if you're 1-tricking Draven, Draven will be S+ tier just because you're that good at him. Now, if you are not a Draven 1-trick, Draven is probably going to be something like A+ tier if you're like decent at Draven like me and not like a Draven 1-trick. Now here we have Varus and Ezreal, who I think both of them are overrated. Varus I think is very good, but I just don't think he's S+ tier. I just think the other 3 are better than him. Ezreal I think is a little bit overrated, and everybody's putting him in S+ because he got buffed on his Q scaling, AD scaling. But honestly, I'm most confident about this part of my tier list because I am an ADC main. Honestly, Ezreal isn't too much stronger than what he was in the last patch, because honestly, you're only gonna feel it when you're like at 3 items onwards, and your early game has really not much of a difference. So Ezreal in the S tier. Now Xayah, someone who I think is very underrated, and I actually just released a video on her right before this one. So honestly, Xayah, really underrated and very situational pick. And when you are in those situations, she's definitely S tier. If you randomly pick her, she's probably like A+ tier. Vayne also pretty situational. Normally, you would want to pick it into heavy tank teams, at least 2 tanks on the enemy team, like maybe a Mundo and a Rammus, or or like maybe like even like perhaps even like a Renekton slash Riven with like another tank, say like a Galio. You normally only want to pick her if there are like 2 tanks or and above on the enemy team. If not, Vayne honestly, it still can work. Obviously, it's a very hyper carry kind of champion, but honestly, I don't think it's worth picking Vayne if there aren't tanks on the enemy team. So Xayah and Vayne a little bit more situational, but in their correct situations, they are definitely in the S tier. Now, Miss Fortune, I think is really strong if you pick her into a team that has a lot of CC, like a team that has something like Amumu, Diana, Kennen kind of team comps with somebody who can layer CC with so that she can hit her bullet time onto people. If not, she is not gonna be that good. But either way, I think she's a plus tier. Caitlyn, honestly, honestly, I think she's at a good spot at the moment. She's definitely good, but just not great. Senna, fasting Senna, I think is very good as well. Something people don't really discuss too much. Fasting Sun, I think, is really strong. Now, Jinx, I think, is someone that people are underrating quite a bit. Now, honestly, she is weaker than, like, how many ADCs are above her? Like, 10 ADCs above her. But, honestly, she can still be very strong. I have played quite a bit of Jinx recently. And honestly, when you get a reset, you can still, like, destroy people. Are there better options to play? Of course there are. But is Jinx still an okay champion to pick? Yes, she is. She is still average. Now, Akshan average as well, not too good in the ADC role, a lot better in the mid lane. Now, Ashe, Tristana, Jhin, just not at very good spots at this point in time. Tristana for her to be good, and Jhin for him to be good, they both need to get a very strong early game lead and get fed in the early game, which is very hard to do inconsistently. Ashe a little bit more utility, not too much damage until you reach like the very late stages of the game. Alright, so now quickly into the APCs. Now, Ziggs and Corki are the two best options you have if you need AP. Ziggs, obviously, he's just a very strong champion in general. And Corki, also a very strong, underrated champion. So if I had to choose an AP option, I would pick these two. Closely behind them, if you don't like these two, I would pick Orianna. Orianna, very strong of a champion, as we covered in the mid lane tier list. Then, obviously, your last two choices would be Veigar and Brand, who are still viable in the APC role, but just that I wouldn't really pick them. I mean, I might pick them if I want to make a video on them, but if not, I wouldn't actually pick them if I was, seriously trying to try harding in the ranked match. I would go for like Ziggs, Corki, or Orianna at worst. Alright, so now we can move on to the last part, which is the supports. Alright, so for supports, the upper echelons of the tier list still remain the same. Nami and Lulu still the two best enchanter supports, and Thresh is the best tank engage support. I chose to move Thresh into the S plus tier because I really think he is that good. I have, especially as a bot laner, I have faced against many good Threshes, and they really can, just make your life a living hell. So Thresh just really good. Obviously, I play with a Nami one trick. Nami's really good, and I've played with a lot of Lulus before. Lulu is really good. Now, Braum, honestly, I think is very underrated. I think he is definitely S tier, but after he got like those couple of nerfs, people are underrating him a lot. But a good Braum still can, make it a lot easier for his team especially with his passive. So Rakan, very strong engager, probably the best engage support at the moment. Obviously, Thresh engage is pretty it's pretty obvious, like, he's gonna flash and flay, or he's gonna hook. So most people know like Thresh engage. Of course, Rakan engage is pretty obvious as well, but you can do it faster. You just pop the quickness, go in with your W, and everybody is CC. So honestly, I think Rakan best engaged champion at the moment. I think Janna, after she got nerfed on her W, she definitely got weaker, but now I think she's a little bit underrated because people pretty much stopped picking her after that. But honestly, she's still pretty good, and she still has her place in the meta because she can disrupt a lot of things. Like, for example, when Lee Sin flies in, she can knock him out of his Q. She can knock Akali out of her E. She can knock Alistar away, etc. She can knock Rakan away, although it's difficult, but she can peel a lot for her ADC. So I honestly think Janna is still very strong. Now, Morgana, this is her best role, being a support. Very strong with her binding and her black shield. Now, Senna in the support role honestly still can carry very well. I just don't think she's all the way up there in the S or S plus tier anymore. Seraphine, huge teamfight ultimate. I think is very underrated. Most people think Seraphine support isn't too good, but honestly, I do believe that it is. Alright, now finally, not finally, but finally in the A plus tier, we have Soraka. Now, I know that there is another YouTuber out there who rated Soraka very highly, but I was already planning to put her this high before I even watched that video, although I did. So, reason is, I have a friend who played Soraka with me, and I played Vayne. Now, it at like level 4, I tanked like 4 or 5 tower shots just because Soraka kept spam healing me, and I simply cannot believe how insane Soraka healing is. So, if you have a good Soraka player, honestly, I do think Soraka is really that good, and I do think she's very, very underrated by everybody, because Soraka really is just that good. She will become so big of a problem that the entire enemy team will just dive the backline just to kill the Soraka, and then they'll lose the fight because of that. Like in that particular match or matches. So really, I do actually think Soraka is pretty good. She's not S or S plus tier in my opinion, but I do think she's A plus right now. In the A tier, we have a lot of the engaged supports. Leona, Alistar, and Galio. All of them are still, alright. Lux, honestly, Lux support in terms of like just building support, honestly, I don't think it's that good anymore. I honestly think Lux normally goes AP. Now, I have a friend, of course, who also goes Lux AP, and it's probably better than the support build, but Lux honestly not too good at the moment. Now, Brand support pretty bad because you cannot get enough farm. Sona just pretty bad. Now, her late game honestly is obviously insane, but it's just way too hard to get past the early game with Sona. Now, Blitzcrank, honestly, I still think it's pretty bad. Unless you can hit hooks consistently. If you can hit hooks consistently, you're probably a Blitzcrank main, which probably means that it's going to be like S or S plus tier for you. But honestly, I think Blitzcrank in general is pretty bad. Alright, so now C tier, just like, the supports you don't really see that often, but I still see from time to time, which I think are very bad. Gragas, only good if you're playing like with duo with Yasuo in the bot lane. Annie, Malphite, and Pantheon, just all pretty bad supports. Alright, so with that, we've come to the end of the patch 3.0 tier list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. And, feel free to discuss your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to reply and discuss with you guys. So thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.